Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. We're back ahead of a big week for Tottenham Hotspur. It's fair to say there's been a decision that's had to really be made for months in terms of the manager, and they finally made it. But is it too late, or can Igor Tudor rescue our season? And I'm going to have to get used to saying here on this edition of Last Word on Spurs, I'm joined by three fellow seasoned Spurs sufferers alongside me. I'm joined by the superb Martin Lipton, Tottenham Hotspur correspondent. Martin, checking in firstly, just a temperature check. How are you? Love to see you back on. Feeling more confident this week than last week?
Well, I can't feel any less confident. But first of all, can I apologise? I just realised I'm living in the world of the 60-watt bulb where everybody else wants to be in 200 watts, so you can barely see me, but it's my stupidity. It's been a difficult few weeks and months, and what we saw this week was an inevitable end game. It probably should have gone. In fact, it should have ended before, sadly. We'll discuss later the ups and downs and ramifications thereof. I just think it's very sad, but a necessary act.
Indeed. Also back on the show, but a while since we've had him on here. I say a while. We was on, I think, just after the game. I think the Newcastle game in the Premier League. And I said to him at the time, we want to make it happen more often. We've got the superb Martin Cloake also back on the show. Martin, lovely to have you here. Just another quieter week in the world of Tottenham, right? Another quieter week.
Yeah, never a dull moment. And I think what's happening at the moment has been a long time coming as well. But we'll dare say talk about that during this episode.
We will indeed. Lovely to have you back here, and also Ian Lubin returns. Lubo, of course, back on the show from the Spurs 5. Lubo, lovely to have you here. Listen, you lot have seen years of this. So, I mean, can I really be surprised with regards to Tottenham? It's never a quiet moment, right? Another roller coaster on the journey, Lubo, right?
Listen, it's been great for YouTube, hasn't it? With a 12-day break. You're on YouTube. There's no shortage of content this break, is there?
No, Tottenham forever giving us content. And like I say, just on the back of that, they're bringing obviously the big news has been, and for guys out there, as always, we appreciate all your support for the show. Really, really do. Thank you ever so much. I mean, I was informed before we actually went live, we've just hit over 10 million views covering Tottenham during our time on YouTube, which Luba referred to there, which I do think is probably down to a lot of what Tottenham have done to us in the last 3, 4, 5 years, and the amount of scenarios that you think that can't be possible, can it? And then it does actually happen. And just the thing is, at times you think can't get any worse, can it? And it eventually does. But thank you ever so much for all the support we have for this show. I've had a lot of emails that have come in over the last few months from Spurs fans that are generally concerned about the nature of where the club is going. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, they have made a change. And for those out there, before we bring that in, if you can, for us, like, hype, subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated to the show. So it is now formal. It is now confirmed and official. Spurs have changed, of course, the head coach. They've now got Igor Tudor that has been appointed as Spurs' new head coach, of course, replacing Thomas Frank. He's become the club's interim and will take charge of Spurs until the end of the season. Now, I think what's key is that even if his appointment does turn out to be a success, there is no option at all which would see him take the job on a permanent basis. But you could argue that he, at the moment, would be performing with a view to, in his mind, maybe thinking he can stake a claim for it. We know Spurs maybe are looking at towards the summer, and we'll get Martin Lipton's take on this as well. The likes of Roberto De Zerbi, Mauricio Pochettino potentially in the frame. But as we know, with the players returning to training today, for listeners and audio, there'll be a new voice. There'll be a new presence in that dressing room. And Tudor has said upon getting the job that it's an honour to join this club at an important moment. I understand the responsibility I've been handed, and my focus is clear to bring greater consistency to our performances and complete with conviction every match. There is strong quality in this playing squad, and my job is to organise it, energise it, and improve our results quickly. Sporting director for now, Johan Lange, said Igor brings clarity, intensity, and experience of stepping into challenging moments and producing impact. Our objective is straightforward: to stabilise performances, maximise the quality within the squad, and compete strongly in the Premier League and the Champions League. I know for many suffering Spurs fans out there thinking, why is he not saying keep us up from being relegated? But I'm not sure you're going to get that kind of thing in a club statement. But if we can, Martin Lipton's open with you on this show. He's been a busy man, this guy. He's had 12 jobs, and he's actually only been hired at the start of the season for 3 of them. He's been termed as a firefighter. And like I say, his first game in charge comes no smaller than just a North London derby against Arsenal. What have you made of this last week? And now we've actually got a new man in the hot seat.
Well, first of all, the one thing I don't want is consistency, because we've been consistency rubbish for the last few months. I would like a bit of a change from that. No, look, he comes in with a decent reputation as a troubleshooter, and he had a fantastic career as a player. He's managed for more than a decade, and he's been about 5 or 6 different countries. So he's no mug. He hasn't got any Premier League experience, clearly, and that is a slight concern. What was needed, without question, was a new voice, somebody different, because they had not stopped listening to the old voice weeks, maybe months ago. There needs to be someone at the top of the helm of the playing side of it who will shake them, to make them realise what a bloody mess it is. Because I thought after the West Ham game that we were in trouble, because it suddenly gave them a half chance of getting back. And we're beyond that now. We are in a desperate plight. And even at this stage, the thing that might keep Spurs up is the failings of others rather than themselves, which is really disconcerting and worrying. But it needs 4 wins to be pretty much guaranteed from 12 games. Now, his record is 40% win over his managerial career. If he does that, it gets to the 4 wins. That will do. I'm not just really targeting a win against Arsenal, but the next 2 games, which are Fulham and Palace, are matches that could transform everything. Just win those 2 and everything feels very different. He needs to make an impact, though. He needs to make the attitude of the players better, the atmosphere within the ground better, because home advantage is supposed to mean that, a home advantage, not a home disadvantage. And for a variety of reasons, that's what it's been for actually more than a year now. The mood within the ground has become desperate. And I understand why, because it's been so poor. And that isn't just under Frank, it was under Postecoglou as well. The performances have been wretched. The attitude of the players has been worse. And the need for a wholesale change, a transformation of all of that is absolutely essential. So the deal has been done, overdue, sadly. As I said, I really thought it was a good appointment, Thomas Frank. I really thought he'd be successful. I know he's a really good bloke. I know he's a good manager. And I think he'll do a really good job at Palace or wherever he turns up next season. But it simply has not worked. And the mistake was made of not recognising that at the board level earlier. You could go back now to Bournemouth at the start of the season and Wolves at the start of the season. And even a few months later, obviously, Chelsea, which was desperate. And some of those other performances where they simply weren't good enough. And it was not going to change. And in the end, they've done it out of panic because they suddenly looked into the abyss and thought, we are going to disappear down that black hole.
Yeah, I mean, I say they've made the change, and we're going to see how these next few days do pay out for him. Massive, massive week. I know one of the things, Martin, to bring it over to you, there was a concern about the lack of his Premier League experience, and I think given the fact that it feels the club now, as well as the fans, are seriously concerned by our league position. I think relegation for the first time since 1977, it doesn't please me by saying this at all, is potentially a real possibility. I mean, they've turned to a man that has produced revivals in clubs that he's walked into, the likes of Juventus, Lazio mid-season. He's got instant impact out of those football clubs. Gut feeling now, you've had a few days to settle on the news that he's coming through the door. How are you feeling approaching a massive week for the club? Arsenal, of course, at the weekend, but now we know 12 Premier League games to come in and save this club, which I couldn't believe I was ever going to be saying on a show with Tottenham, but it's where we are. It's where we find ourselves.
You've got to hope. You've got to hope it works, haven't you? I mean, I don't profess to be a great expert on how Tudor's going to get us playing, so I've kind of going on what I'm reading, what other people are saying are a little bit more informed than me. But I think Martin L just touched on the point, didn't he? That yes, a change was needed. Although I always say that something must be done is one of the worst reasons for doing things. But a change was needed. But it's been evident to those of us who've actually been watching the performances for months that something needs to be going on. The problem we've got is that the people who are running the club and making the decisions know absolutely nothing about football. And this is further evidence, and this is where the concern is. There is a concern about Igor Tudor not having any Premier League experience, but Thomas Frank had lots of Premier League experience, and that didn't work out too well in the end, did it really? So maybe you can overestimate that. But the bigger concern is the panic and incompetence that this reveals at the very top of the club. And this isn't something new, because again, if you believe in the stories, and it seems to be well-informed stuff, the bloke who was one of the two directors of football, who they decided not to back his opinion, so that's why he left, recommended Igor Tudor in the first place and said you should get rid of Thomas Frank. They decided to back Frank through the transfer window, which is if they were going to make a decision to move him on, then they should have done it then, to at least give somebody a chance. And now, this is after a season where most of our transfer targets seem to bear remarkable resemblance to the ones that Ange Postecoglou wanted to bring. That they've now gone with the recommendation for the new manager that the bloke who they didn't back as a director of football has gone for. So it completely undermines Lange, I think. But it just, the utter incompetence and panic at the top of this club is the thing that's really, really concerning. And what you hope in a way is that there's now a bubble, the dressing room and Igor Tudor, and they get on and they put those 3 or 4 wins together. And it is time for the players to step up as well. Because we have been bad for quite a long time under Ange and under Thomas. I still, when I argue with some of my mates, they say that you can only do so much with the players. I think that this is a top 8 squad at the outside, possibly a top 6 squad. But those players have got to start showing it, because maybe I'm wrong. But because there's another consistent, as well as the way the club has been run and has been run for too long, which is not as an elite sporting institution, not even really as a sporting institution. But the common denominator is that those players have been there right the way through. A lot of them are injured, but they need to be stepping up now, because maybe they're not as good as we like to think.
No, I agree. I think, I've said on here consistently that the squad is nowhere near what I'd want it to be for a Tottenham squad. I have reservations definitely around the squad, but I also feel at the same time, Spurs, they shouldn't be 15th, shouldn't be 14th or 13th. They should be in the top 10 comfortably. And they should, I think at the start of the season, when you saw performances like the Man City one under Thomas Frank, or even at that time, we did have injuries. I think if you said to anybody that similar squad that we had, and yes, we've had players, of course, go down since then, but we'd be battling relegation. I mean, I know we're all at times pessimistic about the club, but I don't think any of us actually would have believed that, as bad as it has been. Lubo, love to see you back on the show. I know you've been with us a lot through the season. So, look, the reality is you've been seeing this kind of unravel with us almost fortnightly, really, sometimes weekly on this show. I'll ask you, how do you feel now, given the fact there's been that change? Tudor's come in. We've touched on the fact, not got Premier League experience, but is somebody that is known to having to come in, be dropped into situations and get teams out of a tricky feeling or tricky run of form that they're in right now. How do you feel about the appointment? Because again, I do know some fans are concerned about the fact that his last job involved in a winless run of 8, which saw him lose his job at Juve. So there are those concerns there. Your gauge on the feeling for you going into a massive week?
Well, when I was asked on a show a few weeks ago, who would you want? The two that I would have wanted to bring in was Redknapp, because he's a great motivator, and Carrick. And after Carrick went, I was sort of looking at maybe Defoe, because he knows the club. So do I know much about Tudor as a manager? No. So I'm not going to comment. I think any manager who would have come in as an interim would be a risk. You're not going to bring in, you're not going to bring in, you think about it, Allardyce. If you want a Red Adair type manager to come in, who comes in and saves clubs from relegation, this is Paritish's. This has got Paritish's fingerprints all over it. This is his contact from Juventus, and just looking at it logically, he had Nick Bucha and maybe Charrington have gone to Paritici and said, "Look, we're in a mess." For me personally, they didn't back Frank in January in the transfer window. Gallagher was just a replacement for Bentancur. Lange brought in 2 or 3 kids. So for me, they were having misgivings weeks and weeks ago. The fact that Vinai and Lange wanted to keep Frank, and had Frank stayed, we'd have finished up in the Championship next year. There's no question about it. After seeing that first half performance on Tuesday night, that was the worst I've seen by a long stretch. And we've had some bad performances this season. So for me, it looks like the club have gone to Paratici to get this sorted. You know, they've gone back. Paratici recommended, it's come out, hasn't it, in the press that Paratici recommended this guy 2 or 3 months ago, which means that, again, when it's come to getting rid of Frank, Vinai's been told what to do. For me, looking logically at it, they have bypassed him and Lange when it comes to bringing in Tudor. And to be honest with you, I don't know what these two are doing at our club. I can't see how they last. If they're being sidelined for major decisions like this, I can't see how those two have got a future at the club. That's my opinion. How do I feel about Tudor? Listen, if the reports that are coming out, I mean, one report was Romero's turning up late by half an hour for training. I mean, this sort of nonsense has got to stop. He's, by the sounds of it, he's running the dressing room where he was when Frank was there. So for me, let's get back to being a proper football club. And maybe if there's a bit of discipline brought into the dressing room and players are given a major kick up the backside, they will go out and play for the badge. Because these players don't realise what a great fan base this club, a loyal fan base this club have got. And, I couldn't stand the previous manager. I thought it was kamikaze. Frank, I was really looking forward to seeing, but I think I overestimated the impact he had on Brentford, because Brentford is a well-oiled machine that Matthew Benham set up, and it's the collective rather than just Frank. I probably went over the top on Frank. So I just want a really good manager. I want somebody to come in, steady the ship. For me, we need 12 points from 12 games. And you look at that, and you look at the home fixtures with after Arsenal, Brighton, Leeds, Forest, Palace, Everton. There's no reason why, if we have a team that are playing together with a system, giving 100%, there's no reason why we can't get the points we need. Because the players are good enough. There's no question about it. We shouldn't be anywhere near 16th. Yeah. Not saying the top 6, particularly with the injuries. The only fly in the ointment for me are the injuries, because they're dropping like flies, haven't they? Since January, since Kudus, they've just been going down one after another. Yeah. So
at the moment, Lubin, you said there. At the moment, from what we understand, going into this week of the North London derby, he's only got 12 available players, maybe only 11 to actually work with. I mean, it might be more than that when you start including the players, of course, that are there academy-wise. I mean, Martin L, to bring you back in, I feel like there's been already a lot covered even in this first 15, 20 minutes on the show about just what is wrong at Tottenham and how we fundamentally got to the decision of Tudor. When we look at the fact, though, that he has worked in the past with the likes of Kalabawani, he seems to get a decent tune out of him. He's coached Dragoshin, Bentancur, Kulusevski in the past. Romero, I'm not quite sure if there was any kind of carryover there, if he ever got to know him personally at all. But how important will that be, the fact that he's had some kind of connection to some of these players in the past? He's got a couple, obviously, Italians in there, so there's Italian speakers in that dressing room. I think Luba said such a key point there, which I think a lot of fans are worried about, culture. Because there's a lot wrong with Spurs in terms of the culture of the club. How quickly has he got to get in that dressing room and get on side of this group? Because I think, when I think about it in general, we talk about a Redknapp or a Defoe or even a Carrick who was available at the time. That would have, I think, suited the supporters, but it's the players that have got to get the result right. It's the players that will go over there and cross the right line and connect with a manager. So I just wonder your thoughts on those points.
I think that if there's a rapport with any of the players when he arrives, that's great. The key is he's got to build one with everyone, or to make them respect him enough that they'll play for him. None of them liked Conte, but in the first year they all played for him. None of them liked Mourinho, but at times they played for him. All of them quite liked, I think, Postecoglou, but didn't stop them not playing for him. It's not about whether they like him or not, it's whether they respect him enough to play for him. And, as I've said a million times, and was proven by Van der Ven a few months ago, the reason they won the Europa League last year was because the players decided the tactics, not the manager, in those European away games. Now, this time they've got a manager who I think will play a certain way. We know he prefers playing with a back three, but most of his matches do that. Therefore, we have to assume that's what they'll do, albeit that probably means Paulinho as the third centre-half. And with what else is left, that's Sarr and Gallagher central mid. And I don't know, maybe he might play Sousa left back and Spence right back. I mean, or Gray right back and Spence left back, but he hasn't got too many options. Nevertheless, they've got to play with what they got. You can only play with the cards you've been dealt, and he has got a relatively small hand. But you can bluff your way to win with two pairs, or even with a single pair. If you can do it right, he's got to get them to go out and play. The thing that really matters, I think, and I don't know if the other boys would agree, seeing them try to win as opposed to trying not to lose.
Yeah.
And stopping only trying to win when you're 2-0 down at half time. There were some great performances in patches for 20 minutes, 30 minutes under Frank. Never really when we were at the start of the match. Always when you're playing catch up, when the other team were allowing you to have the ball. I was really frustrated time and again. The ball went to halfway and came backwards. Players were inhibited. The manager was inhibited. He was wearing a mental and tactical straitjacket. He lost all faith in himself. The players therefore lost faith in him. You could see it dissipate week after week, even further. If you look at the season, too many games, the only times we've scored have been set pieces, crosses for the centre half, or long range efforts on goal. Or look like score. We just don't get through teams properly enough. We have done that in Europe. Guess why? Because the other teams don't pressure as much. We've got a physical, English teams have a massive physical advantage in European football, and that's why a team as bad as Spurs, where they finish in the Champions League. And also, let's be honest, they got a really soft run of fixtures as well. I mean, if you look at the teams that they played, it was as gentler an 8-game format as you could have had. Nevertheless, they were able to impose themselves far more easy. You can't do that in the Premier League unless you're actually willing to win that physical battle.
Yeah. And
so far, we haven't been. I think we're far too easy to play through. That's really frustrating. And that goes back to last season, exactly the same thing. Too easy to play through. And we're not adept enough at playing through teams. Now, to be fair to Postecoglou, at times we did play through teams. But he had Maddison and he had a fit Solanke for most of the season. And he had Kulusevski. Now, whoever's in manager at Spurs hasn't got those three. You've got to find a way. Well, obviously, Solanke is now back. So you've got to play with what you've got. At some point next month, Kudus will be back. That'll make a difference. Some of the others, hopefully, Bergvall, etc. You'd hope that for the last 6-7 weeks, you might actually have something approaching a squad. But for now, he hasn't got that. He's got 11, 12 Premier professional senior players. He's just got to get them to play and find a way of transforming the mood by playing a bit more front foot. Yeah. If we try and stop Arsenal scoring, they will win. If we try and hurt Arsenal, they may well win. But we might get something out of it. If we just try and stop them, we're not good enough. They'll score from a set piece and we'll lose 2-0. We might lose 3-0 anyhow, but I'd rather have a go and try and win. That performance at the Emirates the other month was a disgrace.
Yeah.
It was embarrassing. Yeah. They can't play like that against anybody. We're supposed to be Tottenham Hotspur.
Agree.
You're allowed to lose.
Yeah.
But you are supposed to try to win.
I think the key is, though, this is where Frank lost a lot of fans and maybe some of the players by the nature of those displays we saw in those London derbies against the Chelseas and the Arsenals. And this is why it feels maybe a change. You said it, Martin Cloake, as well there, around even that feeling going into the stadium, now having a different voice, a different person there. Supporters may go in. I mean, I think the thing about the Arsenal game is, and I don't want to speak for every Spurs fan out there, I wouldn't want to do that. And again, I never intend to do that. I don't think anybody's going into the Arsenal game thinking we should be winning this. But like Martin said there, at least hopefully we'll just give it a go. And you just felt under Frank that if he was remaining in post, we'd be absolutely terrified about what Arsenal are going to do to us and not actually try and focus on any of our strengths. And whilst I understand right now that we are decimated by injuries, I just wonder, Martin, see on that point of the fact that we've got a manager here that has been through a very similar situation at Udinese, which again, I appreciate, different league, different team, different circumstance. Many might argue different size of club, but do you take some kind of relief that at least we've got a manager that's been through that and can get results quickly? And I guess it comes down to really, like we've touched upon there with Martin Lipton, how quickly you can get into that dressing room, get players on side. Because he's seen as a bit of a man motivator. He's seen as somebody that doesn't shirk responsibility, got a bit of authority with him, and seems to get his instructions over quickly, which is, to be fair, what we're going to need to do in this next week.
Well, I think all you can be is high on hope, isn't it, really? From what I'm hearing, I hope that the things that he is supposed to be good at are the things that he is good at. It's encouraging that he's got that relationship with some of the players that we need to get more of a tune out of. It's encouraging that he's got that disciplinarian reputation, because it does sound like a bit of authority needs to be asserted in that dressing room as well. But I don't know. The problems at this club go so deep, and the mentality and the culture goes so deep. And you're talking about the fans in terms of what we want when we turn up. I think Martin alluded to it as well, that we just want to see them have a go. And I think that God knows, if you're a Spurs fan, you know you're not going to win every match every week as well. But you want to know that the team, the cliches, they've left it all on the pitch as well. I think one of the things that will be good, we were talking a little bit about this pre-show, weren't we? But it will be good for the new manager and the players to look at, is that I think there's been too much focus on the fans. I actually think the support has been pretty good for the last couple of years, all things considered. And I agree with what Ian said earlier on. If you look at our support, and people could say, well, I would say that, wouldn't I? I'm biased because I'm a fan and I've spoken up for fans in the past as well. But I actually think that we've shown some tremendous support when we've seen something to support on the pitch. And actually, it doesn't take much. Even in some of the real kind of bad moments under Postecoglou and Frank, when there's been like a hint of like, it looks like we're going to try and take somebody on. In recent weeks, it looks like Simmons is maybe starting to find his feet and do something. And you hear the roar go up. There's that, yes, we might actually try and get something. So one of the things I think they could do, because I think there's been too much focus on it, is actually stop talking about the fans. Stop arguing with the fans at the end of the game. Stop gaslighting the fans in the press conference, and actually concentrate on the pitch. And if you talk to, I did a book years ago about my favourite Spurs team, the 81 Spurs team, and we spoke to Steve Perryman, who is just a really top guy, and somebody, incidentally, I think that the club should be talking to about where they're going next, because they need some football knowledge and they need some people that understand the DNA of this club at a very senior level. And that isn't there at the moment. But he said, I know the fans like to think that, they made a difference. And he said, of course it does. But if you're a professional footballer, when you go on the pitch, you focus on what's happening on the grass. And that's what they need to be doing. There's been too much. The fans have affected this. They've done that. They've done this. They haven't supported us enough. That's nonsense. I think we've been there. So, if the things that we are hearing that he can do turn out to be things that he does, then that's great. But it goes back to what we were saying. The players have got to take a little bit of responsibility now. We've got to get those 3 or 4 wins. I'm not particularly optimistic about the derby. I don't think anybody who's watched us play recently and watched them play recently would be. But I want to see us go out and try and do something. And part of me is being a bit silly. I'm thinking, well, maybe we might get a draw instead of a hammering. But we'd have had a hammering under Frank. There's no question about that. And maybe 100%. I'm stupid for thinking we might get a point out of that. But high on hope. Yeah,
Martin Lipton, I can see you maybe keen to come back in there. Anything you want to raise on that point?
Well, I think it's a very reasonable point from Martin. The supporters have had nothing to get behind, and every time there's been a kernel of something to get behind, they've done it. That City game, I mean, the boos at half-time were cursory, almost performative. Nobody was that, because it was like, we knew we were going to lose to City, so no big deal, and they're better than us. But then when we started to play in the second half, the mood in the ground changed completely. Absolutely. It was the best mood for 18 months, I think, apart from the European games last year. Because it was a brilliant mood in that semi-final against Bodo, for example, but then we should have beaten them. But the mood was really positive, and there was something to grab hold of. And that was what you were looking for. And that's what, it was, again, there was nothing to grab hold of against Newcastle. They actually played all right for 25 minutes against United until Romero got himself sent off. We're looking all right, but incidents and stupidity once again. But I think that the mood will be great. The atmosphere will be better if the fans see them trying to play. Doesn't mean they'll always succeed. Doesn't mean that every pass will work. Doesn't mean that people won't make mistakes. But the mistakes will be forgiven if the mentality of the players is evidently what the supporters want to see, which is to try and win the game, to try to make tackles, to win the ball, to be brave in possession. Everything they haven't been for far too much of the last 18 months.
Yeah, I agree on that point.
To dare is to do. Who said that?
Exactly.
Just Lubin, I come round to you. I mean, Martin Lipton touched on it there also just beforehand around the fact that he's normally instilled this kind of direct man-to-man style of play, which revitalised Juventus in the past, and he does have a focus on a primary back three. I suppose a lot of Spurs fans will be asking right now, well, how can he deploy a back three? You know, we're talking about really having to have makeshift, maybe centre-backs in there. We're talking about Polina there that might have to come in. Do you expect Lubin to try and stick to that system, given that he's been his favoured system really wherever he's worked? I think it goes back to his time at Hellas Verona, where he was favourable for this system and has taken it really right through his time since in management.
Well, I've been reading that stylistically, Ricky, he's very close to Conte, and Conte's spoken very highly about him, which is for me is really encouraging. I think that if he gets in there and he cuts out these stupid mistakes, because we made so many unforced errors that have given away silly goals this season. And I think that just goes to the training. They're not, if you're not sharp with your timekeeping, if you're not sharp in training, if you're not sharp in terms of professionalism, you go out on the pitch. I mean, first half, how many times have the team been booed off at half time? There have been so many, and they're lazy. I think that it can only be good, because we were going down. I walked down with a game at Newcastle on Tuesday, and I said he must be gone tonight. I'd heard that Charrington was in the grounds, and when something like that, and he hasn't been to many games, and you just think to yourself, putting two and two together, and from what I heard, what was going on upstairs after the game, he was on his way. In terms of talking about what goes on upstairs, I agree with Martin. See what he said before. The one major thing, the big problem for me at Tottenham, you've got a company that is worth. I mean, if Levy's assessment of his shares being worth £1 billion, then the club's valued at around 3.3 billion. And what other businesses that are worth 3.3 billion don't have an expert in that field, in that area? I can't think of one. And I remember going to a charity breakfast many years ago, and one of Richard Branson's top people was the guest speaker, and I said to him, what's his secret? And because he's involved in trains, planes, records, whatever. And he said the first thing that Richard Branson does whenever he goes into a new business is he brings in an expert in that field. And we didn't. Daniel Levy was very good on the commercial side. It's funny, it's very similar to Ed Woodward, who like Levy, was very good commercially, but didn't know the first thing about football. And boy, have we suffered for that over the last 25 years. So yes, we need players that are on the board. For me, I would like an Ajax type situation. Ajax have had Overmars. You look at Bayern Munich, they've had Honus, etc. And this is what we've been lacking. Yes, Levy had David Pleat there. Pleat got jettisoned out when Lange came in. And for me, it's you've got to have experts in. Levy brought in Munn, that was a disaster. Munn brought in Lange, and you got the blind leading the blind leading the blind. So is it any wonder Lange brought in Ange? I mean, no wonder. And the Europa League last year, fantastic at Bilbao. The players went to Ange a month or two before the final and said, we want to change this system. So you've got to look at the players, and thank goodness there were players there that took the initiative. But by and large, the last 2.5 years, the league results have been horrendous. And I think that Frank lasted so long because Vinai had his back and Lange had his back, and the problem was that there was no one on the board with football expertise who could see what was going wrong.
So let's go to that point next. I think it's a really important point there you make, Lubo. Anything else you want to finally say on that before we'll go for the break and we'll come back on the board? But Lubo, I'll let you come and finish that point there. This is it's a massive decision they've now taken by bringing in Igor Tudor. Many would say, like you've said there, I think it's fair to say from the outside looking in, their cards are now marked. Fair to say, Vinai's only been here a short time. Johan Lange has been here maybe for some too long. This feels like a massive decision. Some would call it a gamble. Some would say it's a risk, but it's a big call they've made right now. Lube on that point.
It's a massive call. You know, we just, as Martin said before, it's hope, isn't it? Now, you know, you just hope that he comes in, knocks the players into shape quickly, and the players start playing for him. And you know, for me, it's funny enough. It's although Carrick had virtually his full strength squad when he took over United, nobody expected him to get anything from City and Arsenal, did they? Because it was like a free hit. So I'm not saying Arsenal's a free hit, but I don't think any fan walking in the ground next Sunday would expect Spurs to come away with anything. So if we do, for me, what's more important is that you turn around at 6:30 and you can see that he's had an effect this week. And the players have played for him and the badge, and they've given everything. And for me, that's more important than anything else, because there are there are 11 more winnable games, more, games that you would expect less difficult between now and the end of the season. So if we lose on Sunday, it's certainly not terminal by any stretch of the imagination. But I just want to see that he's had an effect on the players.
Yeah. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll go for the first break of the show. And thanks to the over nearly 10,500 that are watching the show live. We really appreciate your support. We're joined by the top Hotspur correspondent, Martin Lipton is here. Martin Cloake is back on the show. And we're joined by, of course, Ian Lubin as well on this show. Thank you ever so much for your support. I think, like we've said a lot in the last few shows, this again is a really, really important one. And hopefully many feel it's a powerful show given the nature of what we're having to discuss. If you can, for us, like, hype, subscribe. That'll be greatly appreciated. Martin L., I just want to ask your view there as what Ian's referred to in terms of the direction in where the club is going, because we've heard, I think, a lot of PR in the last week, 7 days around the fact that apparently it was Vinai that took the decision to sack Thomas Frank. But then you are hearing from other suggestions that it was the Lewis family who were the ones that ultimately made the decision. Some would say it doesn't really care who made the decision. We got there in the end. But is there a wider concern generally about where this club is going and the direction it's heading in? Because for the fact we're even talking and sitting here about the word relegation, where we need to make a change, fans will be rightly concerned about the amount of money that they're pouring into this club, because I feel this podcast is aligned with a lot of match-going fans that watch Spurs week in, week out and can't quite believe where this club is going right now. What's your take on that for you in terms of the direction of where we're heading right now?
The state of the club over the last few years is almost impossible to believe that it's been so uselessly run. And there are a lot of factors, I'm sure. There's financial elements to it. I think also a bit of it, the eye was taken off the board, in its various incarnations, didn't realise how lucky they got with Harry Kane, and how lucky they got with Son Heung-min, and how lucky they got with the Pochettino years and Dele Alli, and getting Alderweireld for next to nothing, and having Kyle Walker, all these players that they had. And they just thought it was easy, that it would just come naturally. All we did is keep doing what we're doing. We'll be fine. We'll get good performances because we're a big club, and big clubs. You actually got to work at it. And instead, they've been looking at other things. And, Levy was obsessed with the hotel and the property deal for some time. And they've forgotten and about getting more money in from the concerts and the F1 track and NFL, and all of these things are nice, and having the extra money, but it doesn't add up to a hill of beans if you don't get the team right, if you don't get the recruitment right, if you don't run the club like a professional outfit. And it's very hard to say that it has been run in the right manner. It's impossible to say. And what basically we are now reaping the whirlwind of the previous few years. And you could argue it all goes back to the prioritisation on the stadium nearly a decade ago. and the decision that we didn't have to improve the team because we had a good manager and we had a good team and we'll be okay. And, you know, if you don't improve, you go backwards. And we've gone backwards to a horrendous degree. And that's on the board. That's on Levy, but on ENIC, on Joe Lewis, who are still, you know, despite everything else, he still is the real owner. He just isn't the legal owner because it's his shares in trust held by his family. And why has he had to do that? Because he thought he was going to go to jail, and he should have gone to jail, and he wouldn't pass any version of the owners and directors test anymore. And so he can't get involved because the new regulator would boot him out straight away because of what because he had to get a pardon for the crimes he committed. And so we've got end up with his children and his mates and now running it. And Vinai, I don't know how he quite fits in. Johan Lange's not good enough. And I really like Vinai as a bloke. I mean, I've known him for a few years. I knew him when he was at Arsenal. He's a really smart businessman, but he's not a football man. And sometimes you need to take the emotion out of running a football club. I get that. You have to have a cool, calm head. Look at the two best examples of running a club on relatively limited budgets, which are Brighton and Brentford. What did they do? They had an overarching principle about recruitment over a number of years. And it may well be that the manager is actually the least important person at those clubs, in that Frank has struggled when he's had to make his own decisions at Tottenham. There's a number of Brighton managers who struggled when they've left the Amex. I wouldn't be necessarily certain that Keith Andrew would do a great job if he left Brentford and went to a club this summer. Sometimes the institution is the success. The club is what makes everything work. And the manager can be a bit part. But you have to give the manager a chance to do his job. And whilst the managers are responsible for the failings over the last few years, they've not been helped by the people above them. You know, Conte blew up the club, but he'd had enough of the chaos that was going on, and he felt the lack of ambition. Ange came in, was given a reasonable amount of money, not the amount he wanted, but Spurs aren't going to spend £100 million on a player, so why ask for it? Be sensible in your ask. Thomas Frank came in and it just didn't work for a variety of reasons. It all comes down to the fact that the club has been run poorly for too long. And you do begin to wonder if the only thing that actually will make a difference is new ownership. But then again, you don't know what that new ownership would entail. You know, you've had new ownership at other clubs and they've been a disaster as well. It doesn't guarantee it'll be a success. But I do think that the supporter base increasingly believes now that Tottenham will only be what the fans want it to be in a post-ENIC environment. I really do.
I agree. I mean, Martin, we were having this conversation a few weeks ago over the phone about, as fans, where we sit at the moment, because it's so frustrating that I feel for a lot of people out there, and that people that message into the show a lot and email us, that their escapism is Tottenham, and it's just the most unenjoyable experience. So the overriding take for you, like Lubo was speaking about it earlier there, you're hearing these concerns around the media about, in this last week or so, the fact you've got the sporting director and the CEO, allegedly, I use the word allegedly, that wanted to give Thomas Frank more time. And it was actually the Lewis family that instructed Vinai Venkatesham to sack Thomas Frank. So you feel like, even if you thought, as Martin Lipton has said to us there, he doesn't believe Vinai Venkatesham is a footballing man. If the other footballing man is Johan Lange, that is running your football club, and so far from what we've seen, it feels many of the decisions taken from a recruitment perspective haven't been that great. And our failure to be able to bring in better players as well over the line, and the cost that we're paying as fans, how can you have any confidence about where this club is going unless there is a change in the ownership?
I think that's right. And I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there's not really a lot that we can do to affect that with a club the size of Tottenham. But look, I think Martin's absolutely. I used to work with an editor, and one of his favourite sayings, he used to take me aside and say, Martin, the worst people in the world are the people who don't know what they don't know. And that is a fantastic description, I think, of the people that have been running our club on the football side of things. as well, that the footballing decisions, especially since they failed to back Pochettino and got into a situation where they had to move him on, have been absolutely atrocious. You take the decision that they made immediately after that, and Levy had this thing, hadn't he, about Mourinho for a long time.
Yeah.
People kind of sneer a little bit at this and say it is a bit of an emotional argument. If you look at what Mourinho had done to Manchester United, right, he'd taken that club down such a long way because he actively acted against the values and the traditions and the personality and the character of that football club. Right. And after watching him do that at Manchester United, they brought him into Spurs, right, the exact opposite of a Pochettino, right, and he did exactly the same at Spurs. He should never have been allowed to come anywhere near our football club with the reputation he had and with what he'd just done at Manchester United, but they did that. So there's been mistaken decision after mistaken decision after mistaken decision by them. And I've got absolutely, this whole, we all kind of bought into it a little bit, didn't we? The rebrand of ENIC as the Lewis family, the human face of the institution or whatever. And I'll start hearing the Addams Family theme music now whenever I hear the Lewis family mentioned as a phrase. It was a PR job. And we all wanted to believe it was a change, but it's a real case of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Yes, Spurs may never pay £100 million in transfer fee for a player, but the problem, and I know we're going to talk about this later, because Postecoglou said it, and he was right about this, is that we don't pay the wages. And I think part of that is because there is a contempt about, they're just a staff, really. So why should they get the money? If you want to get the best players in, you have to pay the best wages, and you have to have a proper way of identifying them. Lange, as far as I understand it, was brought in because he was quite good at spotting young prospects, and we brought quite a few decent young prospects up. What Spurs have been needing for years is established players who can go into the first team and actually make a difference there as well. This talk of fans being entitled, we said to the board when we were talking to them about moving into a new stadium, if you charge those prices, you're making a rod for your own back, because people will expect you to pay the top wages. They will expect success for that. And why shouldn't they? So people are absolutely right to look at the amount of money that's been generated. Spurs is a fantastically run club, on the business side of things. But the business is that it's a football club. And if you lose that, the rest of it starts going down as well. People have referred to this before, that turning point game when we beat Liverpool 4-1 at Wembley, when we were playing at Wembley in the league. And we kind of dined out on that for a while. Liverpool went out and said, we're Liverpool Football Club. What we do is we win games and we win titles. So they went out and they bought Virgil van Dijk and they bought Alisson. And we know what happened after that. We've gone in completely opposite directions. There's football people involved in that club. There are football people involved in other clubs that are doing well. Brighton, incidentally, is an interesting example because they stick to the same system, which is why they make quick managerial appointments and they bring people in. They've also had a £400 million interest-free loan from their owner. So it always makes me laugh a little bit when people say they're a well-run business, because I think I could be pretty well-run if somebody lent me £400 million. But that's another story. I would feel a lot more confident, and it's something that this board could do. But I said, because they don't know what they don't know, and I think because they're hubristic and arrogant, they always were, and it looks like they still are, is bring in a couple of non-executive directors who are Tottenham people, who understand the football side of it, who understand the culture of the club. Now, that could be a PR move as much as anything, but you've then got immediately those people who care about the club rather than making a profile for themselves, actually making a little bit of a difference. And I think that's something that they should look at going forward. But, eventually, new owners, but, I'm a bit ancient now, I'd give my age away. I remember when, the new owner's always the answer, isn't it? So I remember when Alan Sugar was the answer. That didn't turn out too well. And then ENIC turned up, and they were the new owners after Sugar sold out to them, and then moaned about how much money he made ever since, because, apparently that wasn't enough for him. Yes, I think we probably do need new owners, but people say, well, it doesn't matter if it's a nation state, it doesn't matter this, that, I don't care. I actually do care who any new owners will be, because I've seen too many owners come in, make promises, and even, break them or not live up to them and not follow it through. So we need the right people. But, we're in a really difficult position at the moment, because we would all say we're Tottenham, we would do anything for this club. And a lot of us have in different ways we put in the work. If you're a professional, do you really want to come to Tottenham at the moment with these owners, with this structure that's in there? And I think that's a real problem, because the people who own this football club have trashed their reputation. Okay, we can't do what we could have done, when I was a kid and supporting the club. The Spurs were this big club, this big attraction. You could go out and you could sign the Gascoignes. You could even do what Sugar did, and I was a big critic of his, but he did spend some money in the end when we had the points to, and he went out and he bought the best player in the world. Can you see the best player in the world coming to Spurs now? So this is the problem that we've got, and I don't know how you turn that round. But a start would be get some football knowledge, get some understanding of what makes his club tick at senior level. Because the people that are running this club, and reportedly it's this Nick Butcher bloke, Tavistock who's making the decisions. What does he know about football? What does he know about Spurs?
Yeah. But this is the worry, isn't it? Some suggest that the only footballing man on there is Johan Lange, and it feels fans have already made their mind up in terms of what they think about him. I mean, Luba, I'm not going to preach the converted. I think everyone knows where you stand on ENIC 2.0 and the Lewis family, but I just wonder, it does feel that the reputations of Venkatesham and Lange now are on the line. Can you see any way in which they're going to be given any more time, even come the summer, if those two are not at least going to be looked at and forensically analysed about what has happened over the course of this season? And look, Vinai's only been in there less than 12 months. When you look under his tenureship, we've had the sporting director coming in a dual model. He's walked away. Apparently, they're looking for another now similar model to this. You've had one of the first team coaches that have left. There's just been, again, he's one of these first managers that we go back to this, that apparently run a 30-man measured scripted thing around the whole analytics of the manager. And they came out with Thomas Frank being the right person. Just how much is on now Johan Lange and Vinai Venkatesham in these next few months, Lubo, in terms of that spotlight being shined on them? Have I paused there, Lubo? You got me?
No, I think I'm fine.
You froze.
Sorry. So apologies. Have you got me there, Lubo? So I just what's your take on that for you in terms of those two individuals in particular that are coming under heavy criticism, as you've rightly aligned on this show?
Well, I can't believe that they looked at maybe they looked at 30 people and discussed 30 people.
Yeah.
I can't believe that they actually met with 30 people or their intermediaries. But it was a stupid comment to come out with, to be honest, because number one, fans aren't really interested. Number two, it put them in a position where they felt they had to back Frank. And they got caught in that situation where they were conflicted and they went the wrong way, because at the end of the day, what's best for the club comes first, not them saving face. But they've gone in. What was Frank Levy's choice? Was it Lange and Vinai's choice? I don't know. I think they were probably talking to Frank before Vinai was appointed. So you got to look at it and think maybe it is Levy's choice. But I don't see them lasting. I just don't see them lasting. All the reports have come out and said that the two of them wanted to keep Frank till the end of the season. I mean, that's a horrendous judgment call. When you've dropped from 3rd to 16th since October the 25th, in 3.5 months, and 18 games, we've won 3 in 19, and they're still backing the manager. Yeah. It's not only the manager, it's not only Frank's fault that we're in this mess. There are so many things that have gone wrong at the club. For me, probably, it's funny, we talk about having people on the board. The last person I think who was an owner who actually was knowledgeable about football was Terry Venables, and he left in '93. So the club's been at a disadvantage since then. And they've been very fortunate in the fact that they've had some really good people at the club, like Paul Barber, Michael Edwards, Poch, Harry Redknapp. We've had some super players, over the last 20 years. You look at, there's been no shortage of players that Modric, Van der Vaart, etc. And Poch's team, Gareth Bale. But they've all gone now, and the cupboard is now bare. And so it's been coming and coming and coming. I mean, the first team has been regressing since 2017, when we had that great season at the Lane, the last season at White Hart Lane, when we finished second with 86 points. And since then, our points total has been dropping and dropping. It came back for 1 year under Conte, but apart from that, it's been going down and down. And Kane left, then Son left, and that's the end of Poch's first 11 that was superb. And we've never replaced any of that team with anybody who's been remotely close. Maybe Romero and Van der Ven are the only two that are close to that team, but they wouldn't get into Poch's team of 16, 17. Yeah. So this is where we've landed. So we are in trouble, and they need to decide. For me, they need to decide. The Lewis family need to decide what they want to do with this club. If they're going to keep it, then run it properly. Split it in two. Have a CEO for the football, like a director of football operations, but a top professional. Have the same on the commercial side, but split it down the middle and have experts running the team, because they seem to be happy not to have a hands-on approach. Charlie and Vivian and probably Joe Lewis, because it sounds as though he's probably running it still. But do it properly. Just run it like a proper football club. I think the biggest problem for me is that you look at transfers and look at the expenditure with FFP, PSR, whatever you want to call it. We've always got plenty of wiggle room, haven't we? We never push ourselves. They've only ever taken the club up to so far so that they're competitive, which will mean being competitive means the fans will come in, they'll buy the merchandise in the shops, they'll spend food and beverage in the grounds, and they'll get the people coming through the door that are paying vastly inflated prices for season tickets, and for all seats, to be fair. And that's been the problem. They've never ever stretched themselves, so we've never potential. I'm not saying we win trophies, but we've never actually gone out flat out and said, you know what, we had a proper go at that. Right the way, it's never been a line from top to bottom. Yeah, that's all I want. Have a go. Be in the game. Be competitive. That's never happened under ENIC.
Well, can I just ask, to close this section, Martin Lipton, to come over to you, I want to ask you about your understanding of where we are, because I know you've given us a lot of reports in the last 12, 18 months around the situation of the ownership. There's been interest around the football club. And even like Lubo mentioned it earlier, just to bring that point to you as well, around Daniel Levy's shares and what happens there. Do you mind just, from your understanding, giving us what you understand to be the latest on any potential ownership change or Daniel Levy's shares and how that may work out? What's your understanding at the moment?
I think Levy is definitely looking to sell, but I do wonder whether he's more interested in bumping up the price so that ENIC buy from him at the price he wants to sell. He really would like £1 billion for those shares. There was talk the other week, which there was some sort of approach from Firehawk chap in Hong Kong, along with my mate Brooklyn Eric, who I'm not sure he has a penny to spend actually, but that's another matter, and wants to be the front man for something. I'm hearing suggestions that Staveley and PCP are still in the background and looking and mulling, and they can come back in under stock exchange rules on the 6th of March. That's when the 6-month close period ends. I've always believed that if they were actually got a serious offer in above 3.5, they'd sell. Because I don't think they care about the football club. They just want to make money. And that would be a brilliant return on their investment as well. Whether you find someone willing to pay that for them is another matter. Levy, again, that you can see in Daniel's head, he comes back on a white charger as the chief exec of whoever the new consortium is, which would go down like a bucket of cold sick with the punters, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. These people are playing with our football club like it's a toy.
Yeah.
And they don't care. They're not invested. Look, of course they're not invested like fans are. They can't be, because they're not fans. But I don't think that any of them understand how much the club means to the people who put their money through the turnstiles and pay for the merchandise and have the drinks and food in the ground and all of that. They don't give a stuff. They do not care one jot, one iota, one scintilla about the supporters. And if they get a good offer, they can turn on their money, they'll take it, and they'll walk away with, oh, didn't we do a great job? You know, what is the difference between the Glazers and ENIC? Just less debt. And they, to be fair, they did. Oh, Dan, they built the stadium, but they haven't built a team, and they've robbed Peter to pay Paul. You know, the stadium became the only thing that mattered, and it's a beautiful stadium, and it's a great stadium, and it should be stadium fit for a team of real talent. But if you don't give the squad the depth that's required, you won't have that team.
Do you think, Martin, do you think they care about the fact, and many are making a point actually in the live conversation here around the fact that that stadium, we're seeing more and more empty seats. Do you think that bothers them? Do you think they care? Do you think they're worried about that?
Well, they're still going to make they're going to have a gross revenues of £600 million this season. Their bet will be, oh, well, they'll come back next year and they'll all still buy the season tickets. And if they don't, we'll find someone else who will, because there's always someone who's stupid enough to want to pay. They don't care. A lot of the people who aren't coming are season tickets. Oh, they've paid for their tickets already.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
they're just sick of going. They're not going to. You know, they've already got their money. They don't care.
But this is the other problem as well, isn't it, Martin? That you know what you're saying is right, but a lot of I try not to get pulled into too much stuff on social media because it's really not good for your health. But you kind of get back into it a little bit, and you talk to people as well. And there's a view that says that it's because in football, it's that everything's always the fans' fault, isn't it? Really, in the end, right? But it's the mug fans. It's those of us that keep going. And if only we didn't go, then they would see that there'd be more empty seats, and then there'd be some change. And my reaction to it is that why should I stop supporting my football club?
Okay.
Because of the way it's being run.
Yep.
Okay, I don't go there to I pay for my ticket and I'll still buy some stuff in the ground. I try and buy a bit less. That's my kind of mini protest. But you're there for about 4 hours. So if I want to get a cup of coffee or a beer or a sandwich or something while I'm there, then I don't think that by doing that I am perpetrating this incompetent ownership on keeping them there at all. You're not going to get a situation where nobody turns up or whatever. But what's really uncomfortable is seeing fans turning on each other a little bit here and blaming each other. You're the problem because you're still going to the games. We support our team. And what you said.
If you don't turn up, if it's an empty stadium, they will get relegated. They won't win. It's not because everyone, you need to feed off that. You're right, Martin. It's every fan has got their right to say what they think about the team.
Absolutely.
Don't have a dig at other people who are in the ground because they don't share your opinion about fans. It's a bit, I can go to a game and sit next to someone who cares just as much about Tottenham as I do, and every other of their values is entirely the opposite of mine. Their politics, their this, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. If we're both for that 90 minutes, united in a common cause. And I've always felt that, it's supposed to be fun and that you can't change your club. You can change pretty much everything else. You can't change your football club. Well, if you can, you're not a fan in the first place. You're just a glory hunter. It's one of your, I have cursed my son with Tottenham Hotspur, like my dad cursed me nearly 60 years ago. It's like, I do feel guilty about it sometimes. I've got to be honest.
Likewise.
And what do we talk about at home? We talk about, has he done this at school, and what's happening, and how's his team going on a Saturday and on a Sunday. But most of the time, we took the bonding experience with my boy is talking about Spurs.
Yeah,
of course it is, because it's the great thing that we can all disagree. We can both disagree violently about stuff or both agree violently about stuff because it's football. And I don't turn on him when he tells me I'm an idiot. I mean, I know I'm an idiot, so it's fine. But don't we all feel that way or should feel that? And you're right, man. If the fans who are looking, pointing at other fans and saying, well, you're not a real fan because you're supporting the club, how can that be an argument? How can that be an argument?
I think the way to look at it, for me to look at it, is that what ENIC have done is they've built the grounds and they built the training grounds. So for somebody to come in, it's the best turnkey operation in the Premier League. You know, you look at Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe's talking about rebuilding, like knocking down and building a new Old Trafford. What's that going to cost him? 2.5-3 billion?
It's not going to cost him. It's going to cost us, isn't it? He's trying to take the money from the government to build it.
No, I'm saying, you know, someone like United with Ratcliffe.
Yeah.
What's it going to cost him to build the ground with Chelsea? If Chelsea want to build it
yeah.
and move out of Stamford Bridge, it's going to cost them a fortune. And so for me, that's the positive. If they're going to sell, the only negative is that unlike something like Newcastle, where Ashley sold for 330 million, the pool of people that will buy a football club for 330 million are a lot more than they are that will spend 10 times more. So how long till we get new owners? I don't know. Personally, I think they'll sell within 12, 18 months.
Yeah,
Do you share that, Martin, that feeling as well? Martin L, do you share that confidence?
I genuinely think it's endgame. I think they're looking again. I've always felt that. Look, I know that they had a conversation about selling in 2008 with a Saudi chap.
Right.
And the price that they wanted was 300 million more than he wanted to pay then. And I tell you, and I know it's true. It was always, and when I put it on Spurs, they tried to deny. I said, but I know it happened because my bloke, a mate of mine, was the banker who was involved in setting up the deal. So I know it was happening, you know. And they've had those conversations for best part of 20 years. That just, it's whether anyone comes up with a price. I think everyone now knows what the price is. Is that a legitimate price for Tottenham? Well, probably. Given that all the American NFL owners think that the Premier League clubs are undervalued. They think there's a huge growth potential because it is the only world league. It's the NFL, but for the biggest sport in the world, Premier League. So the TV rights, at some point, they'll be streamed and all these. The Americans think that there's huge growth potential. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was one of those billionaire American owners, and even if there's 2 or 3 of them in a consortium, we're thinking, let's have a bit of this. Because they see Kroenke, and they see Bowerly, and they see John Henry, and they even see the chap at Bill Foley at Bournemouth, and a few others, I think, and obviously Blitzer and Harris involved, and they think, well, we're missing out here. Look at this, a club in London, big club, won trophy, European trophies in the last couple of years. This is brilliant stadium ground. It's so good they play NFL games there. Maybe my NFL team can play there maybe once a year. All of these things you can see why it would be a huge appeal to them. And therefore, if the offer comes in, ENIC will sell.
Well, look, on that point, we are going to squeeze in our belated final break of this show for our listeners that are on audio. I thought the Postecoglou section was going to take most of this time up, but listen, it's always a difficult subject when it comes to the ownership around Spurs, because I know, again, so many Spurs fans watch this show, listen to this show, and are generally concerned about where the future is going. I suppose the worrying point to take away from that, which all these guys have shared, and Martin Lipton in particular, we love having on this show as well, that the concern is for many, or like you said there, Martin, is anything going to really change until they move on? That's the biggest worry. We'll come back on to the end point of maybe what could maybe bond the fans together come the end of this show. But look, we are going to go for our final break. Thanks to the only 15,500 that are with us on this show. We're joined by Ian Lubin from the Spurs 5. We're joined by Martin Cloake back with us here. Always got to say Martin Cloake is getting a lot of love because, again, it is always about fighting for the right of the fans. And I feel there is a kind of growing feeling around the media that there feels this kind of sense of entitlement around Tottenham fans, which I think is so unfair because I think we've been through so much in this last 4, 5, 6 years where I think had other fans gone through what we've gone through, I think they'd be a lot less patient and a lot more, can I just say in the most politest way in that stadium, a lot more hard-hitting. That's how I can put it. And we're joined by the superb Tottenham Hotspur correspondent, Martin Lipton, on this show. I don't want this to descend into chaos because we've got to speak about Ange Postecoglou. I know that we still have a massive Australian following out there. So, look, you might not agree with what we're going to say in this section. But again, this is 3 Spurs fans, 4 if you include me, that have watched this football club for many, many years and will have their views as to what they feel about Ange Postecoglou. I've always said for me that I'm always thankful for Ange. He won us a trophy. He has that moment right in our history. Look, was I a massive fan of his football? Not personally, but I'm so pleased that he won us that trophy and he got the rightly love from the fans at the end. He's been speaking on the overlap in this last week where he described Tottenham as a curious club, not a big club, but we'll bring context into that. The fact, again, that he spoke a lot around the ownership and he spoke about why he believes Spurs are not a big club, which again relates to the wage structure and their failure to bring players in. I mean, we'll start with you on this, we can, Martin C, because he said the club actions are an antithesis of its motto, to dare is to do. I mean, I'll be honest, I wouldn't disagree with actually what he said. I mean, I think he's absolutely right and spot on around what he wanted to do in terms of bringing players in and the fact, I think from that interview, I think he told us what we already know, but it's just someone that's been working under ENIC recently that reconfirms, as we've just said in this last half an hour, big concerns about the direction of this football club, Martin. Is that fair?
Yeah. Look, if I'm ever in a room with Ange Postecoglou, I'll go up and shake his hand. I'll always be grateful for the fact that I think, whatever the stories about that the players kind of rebelling a bit at the end or doing different things, I think a lot of the reason for us winning that trophy was his force of personality and his belief. And he was trying to challenge that whole Spursy thing that had been built up and give a little bit of belief. So in terms of what he said on that interview, I think it's what most of us have known for a long time. To dare is to do is written everywhere, but it's just a slogan that the owners haven't followed that. The board haven't followed that particularly. Even the players don't look as if they buy into it. We don't pay the wages to attract the big players, and we don't behave like a big club in that way. But he could see how big we were because is it only just over 6-7 months ago that we had 250,000 people out on the high road on a weekday because we'd won a trophy? That's the size of this football club as well. So everybody knows that. I think what has annoyed people, I think, about Ange. There's 2 sides of it. One is that whenever you get an interview, and I mean Martin will know this even better than me. The headline isn't always the whole story. Okay, you choose the juicy bits and you put them out there, and especially now in a social media age, everything is the instant hit, the instant click. What's going to get the reaction? So you kind of put the most incendiary quote up there or whatever. You get the thing that you think is going to get people going. If you look at the comments in context, I don't think there's really anything that people can disagree with. I think the other thing that has annoyed people, and look, he's not going to do this because he's out of a job at the moment, and I'm sure he's not skint. He's all right financially, but he's going to want to get back in because he's a professional. He's not going to talk about the things that he got wrong, but I think that we would have liked to see some acknowledgement that actually we were pretty terrible. Under him, I watched us concede the same goal pretty much every week, which is the midfield turnover. Opposition walks through the midfield and whacks it in, or walks it in. Under Thomas Frank, I saw us concede a different same goal pretty much every week, which was the not closing down the player on the edge of the box, really. So, you kind of choose your tactic, and that was it. Things were pretty bad. He was picking fights with the fans as well. He was picking fights with journalists, and that's what happened with Thomas Frank. So there were some issues around Postecoglou, and I don't buy into this kind of myth that's been built up now that we played brilliant attacking football, but we weren't very good defensively. I think we just weren't very good anywhere on the pitch for most of the time, apart from that opening couple of months when he got the double Manager of the Month award. And, I'm also not having the revisionism said it didn't matter. I had an argument with somebody on Twitter who I muted the other day. He said, "Don't give me that trophy rubbish." It's like literally the point of the game. Right, so, that trophy rubbish, I think he was a gooner, so that might have been why he said that. But, he got us a trophy, and it was a decent trophy to win. And actually, we did something which most people didn't do last year, because most people can't win a trophy. That's it. So that's the whole point. So I can understand some of the kind of reaction and talk about that. I don't think Ange was having a go at the club. But equally, we're one of his employers, aren't we? And he got a trophy with us as he's got at most of the clubs he's been at. I've been surprised again at some of the coverage as well. I think that he got quite a rough ride from the press, and I think Frank got quite an easy ride from the press as well. And if you look at the quality of the performances, I don't think that there was much there. The difference might have been that there were a couple of players that individually looked like they were improving under Ange, but I haven't seen any player that looked like they were improving under Thomas Frank. I've seen players go backwards as well. So, but in terms of what he said, and don't forget there is a longer episode coming out now as well. So the overlap again, they know how the media works. You put the juicy stuff up front as well, then you reel people in for number 2. So let's see the context. But anybody who's looked at this club or knows anything about him for a while can't listen to what he said and say, well, that's a complete load of nonsense, because they know it's right. They absolutely know it's right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll bring over to you, Ian. I know, again, your feelings around Ange Postecoglou and the nature of the fact of your feelings around his footballing nature at Spurs. But I just wonder, just on that point, I suppose to look at the points he was mentioning around the fact they were looking at Pedro Neto, Mbeumo, Semenyo, Mark Gahey. He also made the point that for him, and again, there has been a change in ownership. Well, I wish there was a change in ownership. There's been a change of some of the faces on the board. He said he doesn't feel Tottenham will ever spend 100 million on a player, given his time there, like Arsenal spent on Declan Rice. Was there anything, Lubo, you knew, you felt like you came out and knew from that interview, hearing him speak?
I'm just waiting to hear the second part of the interview before I give a definitive opinion. Because, listen, when Frank came in, he played an innovative way of football. I mean, I remember having a chat with David Pleat in the October and asking him what the October of his second season, and asking David what he thought of the system. And he said, well, 2 at the back, you got Romero and Mickey that have got to cover the whole width of the pitch, and fullbacks that are inverted as 10s. It was innovative, and David rolled his eyes as I didn't need to press him anymore for his opinion. It was innovative. It surprised the first few the managers of the first few fixtures that we played. But after 10 games, I mean, it's funny, the Chelsea game was the 11th when we lost 4-1. Everybody talked about him playing like sort of 10 men on the halfway line, sort of playing a high line when you're a man down. And funny enough, the football in the first 20 minutes that we played that day was exhilarating. And if Sonny's offside goal had gone in, we'd been 2 up, it could have been a different story. But the other managers sussed him out, and he refused to change. He refused to accept that people could see the way he was playing. They were taking advantage of it. And it's great if you're at Celtic, and Celtic bring in 60% of the revenue of the SPL, and you've got all the best players there. So if you concede a couple of goals, you're going to score 3, 4 or 5. And it works there. But in the Premier League, the players are better, the coaches are cuter, and he failed to change. And you look at we finished 5th purely because he got 26 points from the first 10, because he then got 40 from the next 28. And if you break down his 2 years in terms of points, but sort of by half seasons, first season was 36. First 19 games was 36. Then he got 30. And season 2 he got 24, and then he got 14. And the whole thing was unraveling, bit by bit from that Chelsea game. Our form fell off, was falling off a cliff. And if he says that he threw the league last year to win Europe, we were 13th when we beat Ipswich 4-1 at Portman Road in February. We were 13th, and our form after the 10 games in the first season would have had us 12th for the last 28 games. So 12th, 13th. We finished up 17th. It wasn't great. But I'd like to hear what he has to say in the second one, because yes, I totally agree with him about the wages. I want to hear what he has to say about his time at Spurs, because so far he's not taken responsibility for anything. Overtraining the players, overplaying certain players.
Yeah,
bringing players back before they should have been brought back, like Romero and Van der Ven against Chelsea last season.
Yep.
So I've not heard any of that yet. So let's see what he comes out with this week. I
agree with what Martin C said. To come over to you, Martin Lipton, to close on this point, that I think it'd be very unlikely if he does address any of his shortcomings, any of the battles that he came up against at Spurs from a negative perspective, because he's trying to get himself another job. So I'd find it very strange if we do get any more from him on his time at Spurs. I imagine they're going to concentrate potentially on his time at Forest and what his future looks like. Martin Lipton, did you come away from that interview knowing anything more? He was suggesting that he feels Tottenham will never, anywhere near a relegation battle. He was questioning about what Spurs are actually trying to achieve. And he gave a story as to this whole Spursy tag. I think the frustrating thing for me was about the fact that he consistently said about standing up for Spurs in the media. And then the first opportunity he gets. And look, it's a point that I totally agree with what he said about the wage structure, about Spurs not being run like a big club. But he did trash us. And I wonder whether that does come across in a positive way to a club that he did bring a European trophy to. I mean, Martin Lipton, what's your case on that for you? And is there anything else you need to add on, Ange, in this interview for you?
Well, he's clearly still angry about getting the bin, even though he said he knew he was going in January, February, and I think we all saw that coming. There was nothing particularly fresh, I didn't think, in what he said. It was all statements of the bleeding obvious. The reality is the way they played in the first 10 games was fantastic. Lovely football, really good. He then keeps trying to play that way, despite not having the players who could do it. Now, you can try it for 1 or 2 games, but when it's not working, you have to be a bit cuter, and he wasn't. And as both the boys have said, last season was an unmitigated disaster in the league. We played Ipswich at home in December and were third, managed to lose to them. We lost at home to Leicester, who got relegated. We were dropping points to absolute garbage all year, and that's on him. It really, and he can't. He won't take responsibility because he wasn't to blame for Forest not winning a game in his 7 matches in charge either. That was always somebody else's fault. Sometimes be brave enough to put your hands up and admit you might have got it wrong occasionally. But then again, he's a manager and he's not going to do that. And as Martin said, he's looking for a next job. And he did bring the trophy. He brought a marvellous night and a fantastic celebration and all of that. And, he deserves to be remembered and feted for that. I have no problem. If there's a picture of him on the wall with the trophy, good luck to him. Absolutely fine. Don't try and kid me. It was great football. Just don't try and lie to me because I'm not going to believe it. I trust the evidence of my own eyes. I don't need to be trying. You can't mislead me over it. I know what I saw, as did the other 60,000 in the ground and all the hundreds of thousands of Spurs fans who weren't in the ground and watching it on television. We all know what was there. Don't it's silly to pretend otherwise. He's just part of the past now. It was 2 years. I think there were some really good highs, but there were an awful lot of lows as well. And frankly, I don't care what he thinks anymore because he's not going to be manager of Spurs again. And there's nothing he can say that will benefit the club. Because if he says something that's positive, the wistful thing is, well, why is he not manager? Oh, what a shame. If he says something negative, it becomes a story. And of course it's a story because he's having a dig. There's nothing he can say that can benefit Tottenham Hotspur anymore. When he was manager, everything he said could benefit Tottenham Hotspur.
Yep.
But too much of what he said didn't.
The final thing I want to close on, guys, if I can, and I mean, it does feel with Postecoglou, he's a manager that much kind of split opinion. Tudor's through the door. We know how big this week is for him to come against Arsenal, but there's a decision to be made in the summer over the permanent appointment. And with all the frustration where Spurs find themselves right now in terms of the direction of the club, there feels there is a man out there for many Spurs fans. I won't say all Spurs fans because, again, you can't please everybody. But there is this kind of growing clamour, certainly in the home games for match-game fans, and especially away from home that I speak to. They would love to see the return of Mauricio Pochettino. Martin L, just to stick with you, your gut feeling on whether it would be Pochettino, because we have heard suggestions that they'll talk to maybe Roberto De Zerbi in the summer and don't rule out Andoni Iraola. With the fact for Tudor that it's an interim role that he's taken on, could the club be looking, just to get your gauge on it, whether there is that reunion with Pochettino, and it'd be good to get your take on what you understand?
I can't imagine there's any world in which they don't ask Mauricio Pochettino to come back to Tottenham. Whether he then comes is another matter. But given he still lives in London, he wants to get back in the Premier League. He's desperate to get out of the US after the World Cup. And he won't get another London job in the Premier League other than Tottenham. And I'm told from people close to him that he thinks actually that the squad he might be inheriting has got more than the one he inherited in 2014.
Wow, okay. Interesting.
Now, that's interesting because obviously he didn't know that he had Harry Kane when he came into the squad in 2014. Yep. Nobody did. Let's be honest about it. And he moulded a unit. You know, his first captain was Yunus Kabul, remember? And he had Adebayo up front and Soldado and, you know, players who just weren't good enough. And it didn't take long for that impact to show. So if he's right, that he's got a base level that's higher, then you can see why he wants to come back. I'm absolutely convinced about that. Whether it's the right decision is another matter. You know, I'm a little bit of one of those who's in the, you know, never go back to your ex view of life. And so I'd be a bit concerned that you can't recapture the magic. But nevertheless, I think it's inevitable that he's going to be offered the job. The trouble I think what we'll know is if they make, assuming they stay up, which is obviously a massive assumption at the moment because they're rubbish, but assuming they stay up, if they are making significant early moves in the transfer market without having appointed a manager, it's because the players who they're signing have been told that Pochettino will be the manager next season and that he would have been talking to them unofficially, telling them yes. And I suspect that that's what will happen.
Can you see a world where, to stick with you, we get an announcement of his appointment before the World Cup?
No.
You can't see that? No?
Not a chance. No, he can't. He can't say anything because he'll have the whole World Cup being asked about Spurs. It's going to come anyhow. But if he says he will be unable to dodge the question if it's announced he's coming. If he says nothing, he can say my only focus for the next 6 weeks is the United States of America and this team, and I'm not thinking of anything else, and I'm not going to talk about anything else because I have a job here to these people who have engaged me to try to deliver the World Cup for the best possible World Cup performance for the host country. If it's known that he's coming to Spurs, then he's going to be asked Spurs questions all the time. And if they don't win a game, he's going to get dogs of views from the American fans for having taken his eye off the ball and actually only been interested in Tottenham rather than the job he's being paid to do. So I suspect that that's where he goes. He can't do anything before the World Cup's over.
Okay. I'm going to close and come back round to Martin L to close the show, but to come over to you, Martin C. I've known you for many years. We sat together in like a Love Sport studio on the eve of the Champions League final. And I remember you that night fielding questions from fans about the excitement going into that Champions League final. Actually, despite the fact, as you remember at the time, as we spoke about it, the league form wasn't that great, but that night was poignant because I remember so many Spurs fans feeling so together about the club, despite us not being in the greatest run of form about and feeling around Pochettino. But the feeling was that he kind of got us, he understood us, and it just feels at the moment we've had many managers since that he's left that just quite never understood Tottenham. And I appreciate for some out there, like Martin Lipton said there'll be some concern about going back. But is this just an itch that we just need to scratch, Martin C, just to know whether this is the right or wrong decision? Because I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but I just feel like right now, I don't think in my time supporting Spurs, it has ever been as disconnected as what it is now. Even from us to players, us to managers, us to the board, fans on fans. There's just so much disconnection. Do we just need somebody that, I can't speak for everybody, but majority-wise, would love to see somebody come back that you know does love Tottenham? And there's no doubt, for whatever reason, I don't know why he does, he just seems to love Tottenham.
Yeah, look, I think that it's an attractive idea, and I like the idea. I'm attracted to the idea just because of what you just said. I think that if you look back over the managers we've had, you know, over the last however many years, 10, 20 years or whatever, certainly in its time, he is the one who gets what this club is about. And, you know, potentially is the one person out there who is able to do the job of a manager of a club in the Premier League that actually gets what we're about. And that was a great time that we had under him. The togetherness, it's some of the best times I've ever had following Spurs during those few seasons when he was with us as well. what worries me is exactly all of those things as well, because it's almost like another let's get rid of George Graham and get Glenn Hoddle, isn't it? It's another PR move by the same owners that we've had for the last 20 years. So let's get Mauricio in, because that will get the fans off our back. It's great PR. There's that connection again. And I would say if that's the reason they're going to do it, then don't bother. Don't bother if you're going to do what you did last time, which is not back him in the transfer market, and you're not going to build an elite sporting mentality with football as the primary objective of this enormous multinational business that is now Tottenham Hotspur. Okay, if you're not going to do that, and I think that Pochettino would want to be at the centre of that project. I think he's ambitious and I think he's intelligent as well. I think what's also interesting is that the last surviving player from his period, Ben Davies, I know he's been around at the UEFA Congress this week. Everybody I ever speak to that's met Ben Davies says what a bright guy he is. He's got a future in the game. He's somebody that could be quite interesting in terms of if they wanted to tap into his knowledge, who's seen what's gone wrong over the time that he's been at the club, who understands what we're about as well. And, there's that connection there again. So it is a fairy tale, if you like, isn't it? And it certainly would bring the good times back if they brought him in. But it's what reasons are you bringing him back for? And are you actually going to put up? And I think, unfortunately, what my bottom line is that while we've got this mob owning the club, we're going nowhere. Doesn't matter who we get in as a manager. I just don't. I think in the end, they will let him down because their priority isn't football. And it is, you talk to anybody in any sport, right? And people kind of poo-poo this idea as well. It's so important. Elite sporting mentality, right? That is something that sets the real winners, the top athletes, the top teams apart from everybody else. You have to have that. Otherwise, you're not going to compete properly. And there's a lot of people with a lot of nous, a lot of clubs in this game at the moment. So the competition it is pretty tough. And just because we're the kind of economic powerhouse that we are, that doesn't necessarily mean that gives us the advantage that it might have done 10, 20 years ago. It was the clubs that had the biggest gates and had the most money that tended to be the most successful, wasn't it? That's been the story of English football since it started, over 100 years. But it is different now. So the worry is that they will bring him back as a PR job, and everything seems to be pointing towards they're doing that. Other journalists I speak to, other people with connections in the game seem to be saying exactly the same thing as Martin's just said, that, those conversations seem to be going on. He's indicated he wants to come back. I hadn't heard this view that he thinks that he's inheriting a stronger squad, which I think is an interesting one. And I think that might quite possibly be true, actually, if you look at the squad that he did inherit when he first took over. But it's going to take some time if they do it. But I said the doubt is still over. Where do the owners want to take us, and what do they know? What are they prepared to do? Because also this ownership have never been too happy. I still maintain that they got rid of Martin Jol because he was getting too much credit for taking us where they were. Because actually, it's always got to be them. It's always got to be about them. They've got to get the credit. They've got to be the leaders. They've got to be the cleverest people in the room. And it doesn't work like that. You have to work with other people. You have to bring people on board with you. So, I feel good when I think about him coming back if it goes right. But I kind of think the most likely situation is that they will bring him back. He'll accept it. They'll let him down again. And in 18 months' time, we'll all be doing this show going, what we need to do is get new owners.
Luba, I want to close you just on this point. Yeah, no, listen, I think a lot of fans feel how you're saying, you're speaking. I suppose it's a point to make, isn't it? Around this situation of Pochettino coming back, is he just so obsessed with the job and obsessed with Tottenham that he'll take it under whatever circumstances? Because one of my biggest concerns is the fact that they go to have talks with him and then he understands what he's having to work with and who he's having to work with. And I don't think he maybe fancies it. Or do you think, like I said, he's so Spurs obsessive, he loves the football club, that he takes it under any circumstance? Luba, what's your gauge view on that with Pochettino?
Well, I think that if he joins, he's probably the only manager that the fans would have patience with, because this is a big rebuild job. He will unite the fan base. I fear that what Martin's just said is correct. I remember his interview the night of Amsterdam. He brought his team out about half an hour after the final whistle, and there was a togetherness, there was a connection that was just unbelievable. I don't think I've ever felt that in all the years that I have been following this club. And so, yes, he gets it. It was an amazing night. And if again, it comes back to the same question. What do the owners want from this club? If they're not going to back him, doesn't matter whether it's Pochettino, Ancelotti, Klopp, Pep, whoever. Doesn't matter who it is. If a manager's not going to get backed, if we haven't got a whole club that's aligned together, the competition is tough. We've got to go up against these other powerhouses, financial powerhouses. We're not the only one. And, the lower clubs in the Premier League, there's so much money in the Premier League that, there are other clubs that spend big money as well that never used to sort of 15, 20, 25 years ago. So if the club back him, then he's got a chance, and it could well be an exciting time. In terms of the players he had at the club when he joins, I think he bought Dyer in straight away. Lloris, Walker, Rose, Vertonghen were already there. So was Dembele. Kane was in and out on loan. Ericsson was already there as well. So he had the main core of that great side, and then he topped it up by bringing in Son, Toby, Dele the following season, and Wanyama the year after that. So is the first team going to be as good as what he walked into last time? Nowhere near. He's got a big job on. As I say, if he gets backed, it will be fantastic. I agree with Martin. You used to go to White Hart Lane, and everybody expected to win. The football was exhilarating. It was just superb.
It was an unbelievable period. Yeah.
It was wonderful. Away games were a joy. I mean, there was such a feel-good factor, wasn't there?
There was.
I think he'll unite the club, definitely.
Yeah.
But again, if he's not backed, and this is where I think this time round, after Amsterdam, I remember seeing the interview when I got back to London on TNT, and he was in tears. He was very emotional. And I think that was down to two reasons. I think it was, though, look what I've done without backing. And they have taken the guts out of me over the last couple of years when I've wanted players and they haven't backed me. And I think he was drained. I think he was physically drained, mentally drained. And I don't think he'll come back if he's going to go, if they're going to take him down that path again.
Well, I think this is the key, isn't it? I mean, if we can, Martin L, to close it with you, we're at, again, a new dawn of an era now with Tudor coming through the door. There's obviously a bigger decision to take in the summer. But is it now just a case, look, I think we've all vented our frustration on the show around the direction of the club, around ENIC, but we've got 12 massive games to the football club. We've got, again, a Champions League competition to also contend with as well. Would the message be right now, look, we know there's a lot of things wrong with Tottenham, but right now, as the fans have always been great, we just need to get behind the team and maybe put our concerns to one side around support, ENIC, generally the ownership. But right now, whatever happens, the club need us, right? Because it's a massive week for the club. Arsenal on the horizon. But again, after that, we've got 11 games to come where let's hope it doesn't get too dark. Would that be the message, Martin, from your side?
Yeah, I think it's imperative that everyone gets on the same song sheet, starts playing the same tune. Because otherwise, if it remains fractured, or even worse, fractures even more, that bond between the fans and the team and the club over the next 3 months, it will only end in one thing. And that would be the worst thing for the club. So it's almost a case, gird your loins, clench your, cross your fingers and jump on board because you have to, not because you want to, but you have to. And then hopefully you actually get entertained as well. Because that'd be nice, wouldn't it? To go to watch a game and actually enjoy it. Because I can't remember the last time I did.
Yeah. That's fine, isn't it? I want to say a massive thank you. Thank you so much, the wonderful, superb Martin Lipton. Martin, I'm getting asked to implore you. Do you think if the likes we're hearing Man United will be looking for a manager, Real Madrid will be looking for a manager, do you think Pochettino still would pick Tottenham over them? Or do you think, again, that's another decision you'd have to really think about?
If he's offered Manchester United or Real Madrid, I think you'd have to think about it, wouldn't he? He wants the Premier League. I think he feels that Real Madrid is not going to happen. don't know where they're going to go. I was, I mean, I can see them going for Klopp actually this summer. My understanding is he's really quite keen. He said he loves London. He's never left. If United came in for him, it'd be a different matter because United are a bigger club. I know we don't like to admit it, but they are a bigger club. But I think that I don't think he's on their list.
Okay.
I don't know who is on their list, but I don't think he's on their list at the moment. So I think that his best option, his biggest option and most likely option is going to be Tottenham. But he's got to be, as the other boys said, he's got to be sold to him properly. He's got to be given proper autonomy, got to be given the chance to do the job properly. And that means recruitment, and that means wages, and that means everything. And that means it being led as a footballing project and not a business project.
Agree. Honestly, let's see. Martin Lipton, you've been a star. Martin Cloake, thank you so much. I know, as you always do, speak for the fans, mate. Thank you ever so much. And let's see the next 12 games takes us, right, in terms of the Premier League. They're all cup finals now, which probably is not the greatest thing to say about Tottenham, but we did win the last one. Is that fair, Martin?
That's a very nice point to end on, yeah. Recent record in cup finals. But yeah, look, I'm with Martin on this. We just got to kind of cross our fingers and jump on board now, haven't we?
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I think, Luba, you'd say the same, right? You know, again, we've got a lot of anger, we've got a lot of frustration about what's happening at the top of the football club. But now is at a point where we've probably got to all get together now and hopefully steer ourselves through these tricky waters, right?
Absolutely. Get behind the team. Let's get the results that we need to finish off the season on a high, which, you know, psychologically will be important going into next season as well. Agree.
Well, listen, thank you ever so much to the only 20,000 that have been watching the show live. Greatly appreciate your support as always. Thank you ever so much. Thanks to, again, the two Martins and, of course, Ian Lubin on this show. Guys, thank you ever so much. From us all, please keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on you Spurs.